So have you ever been wandering around and all of a sudden you stop cold, pull out a knife and take yourself hostage because you haven't got a clue who the greatest superhero of all time is? You need someone to help you. Help me or I'm going to do some damage. Have you ever done that?
No, I haven't, but we are going to tase you into the knowledge of who the greatest superhero is of all time. So we are back yet again.
Yes, we are.
Round 2. We whittled 64 down to 32. We're going to get straight into it. I have Judge Dredd against Thor.
Yeah.
I will go first.
Lovely.
Judge Dredd, the sci-fi British phenomenon. He is the poster boy for British comic books. Everyone who comes from England who's gone to mainstream comics has written Judge Dredd. Mark Millar, Fraser Irving. All the other examples have completely just left my head. But trust me, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, John Wagner.
There we go. That's
they're all
enough.
in there.
That's enough.
They're all in there. So Judge Dredd is just this ultimate badass with a lack of origin story, although they did give him one later on, but I choose to ignore it. He's the faceless police officer of the future. Equipped with nothing but his lawgiver, he gives out swift and decisive punishments on the dot. The city patrols is a wasteland, and he really epitomizes the law. And he was brought in at a time where Thatcherism was on the rise, and this kind of strict conservative lifestyle. And it's the lifestyle that people feared that the police state would get to, that we'd live in a police state where they could just dole out justice just like that. However, over the years, he's evolved into a more rounded character. He has a little bit more sympathy, still not much, and still retains that badass. And an interesting note, he is one of the only comic book characters to actually age with his book. So when he started, he was the young rookie, and now he's the grizzled veteran, which is something that you don't see a lot in comic books.
Okay, Thor is again represents one of the. It's so funny with these Marvel heroes, kind of the main Avengers, because you can point to kind of where they got. You know what I mean? Like they think, okay, you can just see them sitting around in a room and thinking, gods, Norse gods. Okay, we haven't got one of them yet. Let's include him in our. And what that makes for is such. I think Marvel have such a wealth of diverse characters, and Thor completely exemplifies that. We have the brash, mead-drinking God of Thunder. We have a complete powerhouse, often understated, I think, because one of the things you have to do with these kind of god characters is kind of bring them down to a sort of human level, which is partly the reason why the Avengers always have to fight these huge kind of godlike figures. What we also have in Thor is kind of a really nice comic element. The way the fish out of water we have in Thor that we don't have in, I think, maybe any of the other Avengers. Like certainly we have it a bit with Cap, but not to the same extent. Yep. He's out of time. Thor is out of world. Especially when he first arrives, he understands nothing. So all that, I think, makes him a very interesting character. He's super powerful. He's very funny, and just completely isolated individual. Like he's on his own. There's no one like Thor.
That is very true. I mean, what I have to say is, like, I have to look at who has had the biggest impact in the comic book industry. I've got to say, Judge Dredd has had a huge impact. I mean, as I said, he is the poster boy for British comics.
Well, he's had an impact in the British comic book industry.
No, he's had an impact in, he started off in the British comic book industry, but all those writers who applied the tricks and their trade to Judge Dredd then took that style overseas, and you end up with more sophisticated, sometimes grittier comics because of that.
Well, I think that's more a credit to 2000 AD than it is to Judge Dredd as a character.
I can
like
understand
the Judge Dredd character, really not that interesting. I can name
Oh, I totally
I
disagree.
can name half a dozen other characters very easily that are very similar.
I think as
Punisher,
a character, I think he's very different from Punisher and Wolverine.
I don't
think
see how.
he-
In what way?
Unlike the Punisher and Wolverine, Judge Dredd still retains this complete air of mystery about him, and you still know very little about the person that he is. And being that he's a character who's been around since the 70s...
So what you were essentially saying is he doesn't have very much character?
No, no, not at all. He does have a character, just because you don't know him as a person.
What's the difference
you know him as a
between
costume.
Judge Dredd and any of the other judges?
And the other judges? I suppose, unlike the other judges, like Anderson, and I'm not going to try and name
Well, not
others.
Anderson, just surely the point of Judge Dredd is he is a kind of this judge figure that is representative in any other judge. Like they all just they abide by the law, they follow the rules, that kind of thing.
Well, Judge Dredd,
he's part of a larger.
He abides by the strictest concept of the law, whereas throughout the years, other judges have thought, well, maybe this isn't quite right, maybe this isn't the way to handle it. He's the guy who's always been, the system is correct, you have to follow the system, it's the way you've got to do it. And I feel as though there's something to be said for the integrity of a character being kept so strong over so many years.
But I honestly feel like that's simply down to the fact that there isn't much character there. I think the whole point of Judge Dredd's character is that there's not much character, not that there's not a criticism, not that that's a criticism of a character, but I just feel like you can name the traits of Judge Dredd. He is in love with the law. He kind of executes it perfectly. He's the best of the judges.
In the last week, could be gay. It came out.
I don't think that's...
That's a new storyline. It's big news, actually.
It was falsely advertised.
That's very true.
Whereas Thor, I feel like is... I mean, just if you just think about him, he is just iconic. Like, you visualize Judge Dredd, you visualize these kind of traits and this seriousness. You visualize Thor, a whole wealth of imagery springs to mind. The hammer wielding, the mead drinking. You think of Asgard. You think of the richness of Asgard and that world. You think of him with the Avengers. You think of his comedy. You think of the lightning summoning the lightning. You think of his relationship with Loki and the brother thing and the evil brother. And you also think of Thor's humanity, despite the fact that he is a god. Like, that constantly comes back with Thor.
I only think about that in the last few years. Like, I will quite happily say I never liked Thor back when I started reading basically, I didn't like Thor until I saw the film. And then after that, the Jason Aaron Thor, I think, is a fantastic character. I'm not denying that. I think he's amazing.
Oh, but all of the stuff I just mentioned was present. But
I feel as though past Thor has been going through such a, he's been going through changes all the time. They started off with, he had to have this kind of, he couldn't just be a god at the start. He had to also have this alter ego of Jonathan Blake, who's a doctor with the limp, and I feel
great.
as though
that origin story is great, and in the fact that that he was banished and he has to find himself, and only when he learns the morals and learns to have the humanity that Odin wants him to have, does he finally become Thor. And we get elements of that in the film, and I don't think the film does that as well as the comics did it. But all the stuff I mentioned, the dichotomy with Loki, the Asgard, the richness, the comedy, the fish out of water, the humanity, that's all present in the early Kirby Stanley stuff.
But I feel as though it's very hokey, very campy, which I mean is indicative of the times.
I read the first couple of the case files of Dredd, and it's the same thing. It's not readable.
Dredd is parody at the start, in my opinion, when John Wagner and Brian Boland was doing it. It was a parody and a criticism of the system and the conservative ideas.
But it's not very readable either.
I disagree. I have actually read, I've been reading old 2000 ADs that I was given by my brother recently, and I found it incredibly readable. I find them, because they're so short as well, it makes it easier to digest. And I just feel as though it's amazing how they've taken this character and they've managed to make him more serious as the time's gone on, whereas someone like but still maintaining his original integrity. Surely you just said that's
exactly what's happened with Thor.
No, but with being able to still keep all his original integrity and characteristics and moving forward. Thor, I feel, has been through so many different changes with the gimmicky origins and the alter ego, and then they had to scrap that, and then they kept it again, and then they scrapped it again. And I just don't think he's as good as a character as Judge Dredd. In my opinion. So
we're at a stalemate.
Looks like it's going to be one of those.
Stalemate. So we throw it to you in these instances.
Yes, we do.
So let us know in the comments down below, who do you think should win? I've made a case for Thor. I think he's the better character. Dell thinks Judge Dredd. Let us know what you think.
Indeed. So the next two pairings we have are Daredevil versus Captain America. I'll let you go first this time.
Okay, again, another classic Marvel character. And what we have in Captain America is really, if you think about the Justice League, you have there's no clear leader there. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's considered Batman, sometimes Superman. No one's ever quite sure. Yeah. Sometimes it's sort of democracy. What we have in Captain America is the leader. Yeah. We have the World War II soldier. Like I said a little bit with Thor, we have this man out of time. And that dominates a lot of his origin stories. And even to some extent, when Steve Rogers has grown, there's still certain things about the world around him that he doesn't understand. But what is never taken away from Steve Rogers is the fact that he is a natural leader. He leads the Avengers. He is morality. Look at something like the Civil War, where Marvel said they weren't going to take sides, but really Iron Man was in the wrong and Cap was in the right, because they built this character as right all of the time, and that's what he is, and that's what he exists for. He's also completely iconic looking. Like, the fact that they can have a character called Captain America and it not be hokey is kind of an impressive feat within itself. Also, Captain America, what people often forget, he isn't just a human. He's a super soldier.
Superhuman.
Very, very strong. He's very fast and very, very capable and deadly. There is a reason he leads the Avengers.
Indeed there is. And now it's time for my boy, Daredevil. I've been told I'm not allowed to say certain things that I've said throughout the show about Daredevil, namely that he's been dragged through the mud. I said it.
No, he's all lighthearted and funny.
Hey. I'm not allowed to say those two things. Instead, what I will say is Daredevil represents the underdog in the superhero universe. He's unlike the likes of Spider-Man, who's this geeky guy bitten by a spider and he gains all these powers, or Captain America, who's the skinny, scrawny guy with the heart of gold who gets injected with steroids and turned into a super soldier. Matt Murdock is blinded. He has one of his primary senses taken away from him, and yet given at the same time a heightened sense and a heightened ability. And isn't
he blinded by something like chemicals though that alter him?
It's toxic radiation in the face while saving an old woman crossing the road.
So that
classic stuff.
So he does have the infusion of extraordinary.
Oh yeah, of course. But unlike Spider-Man and Captain America, who just gain, Matt Murdock loses, and he loses badly. It's one of his primary senses, the ability to see, and he has to completely adapt to this new ability and this new way of seeing and new way of just being himself. And then he takes this ability and turns it into something absolutely special, like we see with Daredevil. Again, very iconic looking character, maybe not to the extent of Captain America and how his imagery has lasted throughout time. Daredevil's been through a couple of makeovers very early on and has now rooted in the classic red with the little horns, but I would say he is the character who epitomizes the underdog and the kind of overcoming diversity. And
I don't know, I feel like those attributes that you gave to him, he loses, that is true, but I think they're really, like Doctor Strange, we have that with Doctor Strange, maybe to some extent Hank McCoy.
But I don't think any of them lose as badly. Like, Doctor Strange loses the ability to do his amazing surgery because he loses the steadiness in his hands. He doesn't lose his hands, you know.
Beast loses his kind of whole human form.
Beast loses his identity, which again is harsh, but he still gains these abilities,
So
and
does
he can still fully function the way he did before. It's just a bit more.
Well, surely
standing
Daredevil.
out.
The point of Daredevil is that he now functions better than he ever did.
Yeah, and it's this being able to adapt to the circumstances he's given, which I do agree. Beast does have as well.
I guess I don't understand why you like Daredevil so much, mate. I feel there might be some kind of irrationality going on here. I honestly think, who are the better? Yeah, I think Captain America. I think he's completely iconic. I feel like he defines Marvel. He defines that era. He defines the Avengers, and he just has that look about him. And like I say, the fact that he's managed to have that look about him and not be hokey, the Shield, iconic. Like the way that exists on the panel, the way that exists for comics, used so often. We saw in Siege. Talking about Siege. We saw it in that image of the Shield. The way they use it in the Iron Man film. Everyone has knowledge of it. It's up. It's always around.
And it's actually plays a really not incredibly important part in the Daredevil mythos, but Daredevil does say to him at one point that, I've never held something with such precision and that's just so beautiful to move about, because obviously, because of his heightened sense, he really can tell how balanced an instrument is, and he's saying, this is the most balanced thing I've ever held in my life.
Yeah, and I get that Daredevil's power is interesting and different, but really outside of that, I don't see what else there
I
is
think
apart
as a
from what the writer brings to him.
I think the character of Daredevil is pretty amazing. The fact that he's this lawyer by day, crime fighter by night. I mean, there's such a parallel there. Lawyers tend to have this really negative image behind them, and the superhero is the justice of everything and stuff. And it's brilliant the way that they blend those two universes together with the character, and just everything about Matt Murdock. I mean, even in the newest books where he can't practice law anymore because he's out and out as Daredevil, they use that against him. But that doesn't stop him teaching others how to represent themselves in a court of law, and there's this pure righteous justice with Daredevil, not only on the Captain America superhero side of things, where jump in, beat up the bad guy, and then leave again. He does the entire process. He takes down the bad guy, and then he takes him to court. He doesn't just deliver justice, he delivers it signed, sealed, and hands it over to the prison system.
Yeah, but I feel like with Cap, like that's all he's about. Like, he's this character where he has this beautiful arc whereby he exists in a modern world and everyone he knows ever is dead. So the only thing, like the singular thing that provides meaning in his world is justice, is righteousness, is teaching these young heroes that come up through the ranks to be Avengers, what it means to be an Avenger, what it means to be a good guy. Like, he not only is he that, not only did he define that, but like, that's what he lives by, that's his life, that's what he lives for. So I feel as
though the man out of time gimmick of Captain America, which I think's a fantastic aspect of him, I think it makes for a really interesting character. But I think as though that's something that in the newer comics has been left behind a bit, and maybe it's because he's been out of time so long that he's had chance to finally catch up to everyone else. And the Captain America that I've read is, he is a leader and he's a natural born soldier, and he's built for justice and the combat of it. But there's none of that personal tragedy with him. Because for me it's been...
No, but it's all based on that, though. It all comes from that. The reason he is who he is, the reason he is for justice, and only for justice, is because of his history.
But I don't feel as though that's something that's as prominent these days, and whereas a character like Daredevil, his whole humble beginnings and his upbringings by his dad and things like that. Like, he was taught some incredible lessons by his dad in a similar way that Peter Parker's taught by Uncle Ben, but they're something that it isn't, well, that happened back in the 70s, and yes, that is his foundation, and it's something that he carries through. It's something that he constantly goes back to, is these lessons that he was taught of righteousness and right and wrong, and just doing the good thing.
Well,
here we go again.
Okay, we can't make it anyway today. Again, I honestly think Captain America is the best character, and
I honestly think that Daredevil is.
Okay, so people of the internet, we need 2 things from you today.
2.
We need to know who's better, Thor or Dredd, and we need to know who's better, Daredevil or Captain America. Leave your answers down below, and what you say will decide who goes through, who will advance in this tournament. And we've got exciting things planned for the next round of this tournament. So make sure you put the right people through. Captain America and Thor.
I don't think so. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at Comic Book Show 1. I'll be doing some campaigning on there for Dredd and Daredevil.
And also, if you check out my website, just casualrobot.com, you will see detailed analysis of why Captain America and Thor are better.
And if you go to my Just Giving page, you can see that I'm such a charitable person, like Daredevil and Judge Dredd, that they should also go through.
Lovely stuff. Don't forget to come back on Friday. We've got our What Have We Been Reading segment.
Mm-hmm. And until then, we will see you then.
Oh, thanks for watching. We'll see you then.
You left me to it.